This isn't just a dusty piece of history. This is a financial contract. This is the story of the Coinage Act of 1792, and it was America's original promise that a dollar was not a political tool, but a fixed measure of value. The story of how that contract was broken is the only story you need to understand modern inflation, financial fragility, and the silent theft now happening from your bank account. The blueprint of collapse is always drawn in the language of trust, but the foundation of wealth is always truth. The year is 1789. A new nation is born, but it is born in debt. The Revolutionary War was funded by a currency called the Continental. It was paper, printed with abandon. It collapsed so completely that it created a phrase still used today: not worth a continental. The new nation had no credit, no trust, no money. How do you build an economy on thin air? How do you convince a skeptical world to trust your new government? Alexander Hamilton's solution wasn't just a bank or more paper. It was weight. The Coinage Act of 1792. This act was a philosophical statement. It defined the dollar not as a name, but as a measurement. A dollar was, by law, 371.25 grains of pure silver. It also authorized a gold coin, the eagle, worth $10, defined as 247.5 grains of pure gold. This is the critical point. The law tied the nation's ambition directly to the earth. The government couldn't just create money. It could only mint it. It could only stamp its seal on a pre-existing, verifiable weight of metal. The lesson here is simple. Trust is not claimed. It is built. It's built on tangible, verifiable, and legally defined value. The 1792 Act was a restraint. It was a promise that the government would not steal the value of your work by diluting the currency. What's the modern rhyme? Today, we are told that central bank digital currencies are the future, but they are the antithesis of the 1792 Act. One was a promise of substance. The other is a promise of total control. This contract, this promise of steel and silver, did not last, because in the face of crisis, every financial contract is eventually broken. The first major break came with the Civil War. The Union needed to fund the war effort on a scale never before seen. The consequence: it issued greenbacks. For the first time, the government issued paper notes, backed not by silver or gold, but by the full faith and credit of the United States. Crucially, it passed legal tender acts, forcing citizens to accept this paper as payment for all debts. The lesson: crisis is the engine of monetary change. The 1792 restraint was severed by necessity. The government proved that, when its survival was at stake, the contract was just paper. Now look at the modern rhyme. Look at 2008. Look at 2020. Trillions of dollars created, not for a war of national survival, but for a war on market downturns. The emergency power used to fight the Civil War became the standard operating procedure to fight a bad quarter on Wall Street. But the 1792 Act had another flaw. It fixed the ratio of gold to silver at 15:1. But the market price of metals fluctuates. When new silver discoveries made silver cheaper, people naturally paid their debts in the cheaper silver and hoarded the more valuable gold. This is Gresham's law. Bad money drives out good. The lesson: when money has two masters, it will eventually obey the cheaper one. But when it has no master, it obeys only the politician. This is the exact same fight we see today. It's the fight between sound money advocates and modern monetary theory proponents. It's the same war, just with different weapons. The next break was institutional. In 1913, the Federal Reserve was created. The 1792 Act was built on decentralized value. The metal in your hand was the value. The Federal Reserve, however, was built on centralized trust. It was a cartel of private bankers given a legal monopoly on issuing the currency. It was designed to manage the money supply, but to manage is to manipulate. The 1792 Act was a ruler. The Federal Reserve was a dial. And then came the confession. The Great Depression. The 1930s. The banking system had evaporated. Trust was zero. President Franklin D. Roosevelt needed to devalue the dollar. He needed to create inflation, but he couldn't. The principle of the 1792 Act still held. Dollars were redeemable for gold. So, he issued Executive Order 6102. In 1933, the government made it illegal for American citizens to own gold coins, bullion, or certificates. It was a mass confiscation. You were ordered, under penalty of prison, to turn in your gold. The government seized the collateral. The lesson is chilling. The 1792 Act was a restraint on government power. When that restraint became inconvenient, the government didn't just change the law, it abolished the right. You've seen this before. You just didn't recognize it. The modern rhyme? Don't think it can't happen again. Bank bail-ins, capital controls, asset freezes. When the system truly cracks, the rules you think protect you are the first to disappear. The final betrayal came in 1971. After World War II, the world was on the Bretton Woods system. The U.S. dollar was the world's reserve currency, good as gold at $35 an ounce. All other currencies were pegged to the dollar. But America was spending. The Vietnam War, the Great Society. It printed far more paper dollars than it had gold to back them. Every central bank, every foreign nation, every analyst, they all saw the lie. Nations like France saw the imbalance. They started coming for the gold. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon went on television. He temporarily suspended the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Temporary is the politician's word for permanent. That was the day the dollar died. The final thread to the 1792 Act, the last link to substance, was cut. The dollar was no longer a weight of silver or gold. It was, for the first time in history, nothing but a promise, backed by the U.S. military and the global oil trade. The truth of money died. The age of trust began. So, why did America forget the Coinage Act of 1792? It wasn't forgotten. It was murdered. It was murdered by crisis, by political ambition, and by the desire for something for nothing. Now, economists will tell you a gold standard is rigid and deflationary. And they aren't entirely wrong, but they're missing the point. The 1792 Act wasn't about perfect economics. It was about morality. It was a contract. It's the difference between a yardstick made of steel and a yardstick made of elastic. One is useful for building. The other is useful for lying. The original contract is void. You cannot appeal to a law that has been systematically dismantled. So, how do you survive in a system where the definition of money can be changed in a single weekend? You stop playing their game. You adopt the 1792 philosophy for your own life. First, hard assets. You protect yourself with what cannot be printed. The founders chose gold and silver for a reason. They have no counterparty risk. They are not someone else's promise. Real value hides in what can't be printed. Gold, land, and skill, that's the only real insurance. Second, hard skills. You become the one thing that has value in every economy, a creator. The ones who survived Weimar, who survived Rome, who survived every collapse, they were the ones who could do something. The ones who could feed, fix, or trade. Your skill is your ultimate inflation hedge. Your ability is your true collateral. A system built on illusion always collapses. A life built on value endures. The 1792 Act defined a dollar as a weight of silver. Today, the dollar is defined only by the weight of its debt. The patterns are predictable. If you want to see the next financial pattern before it repeats, subscribe to the channel. In our next episode, we'll explore how governments quietly confiscate wealth, not by force, but by trust. Thanks for watching.